What's going on, everyone? It's the Fantasy Football Almanac, back at it with another fantasy football video. Today we're going to be delving into lessons learned from Week 6 of the NFL season. Before we get into it, if you guys could, please go down, give this video a like, leave a comment. I am answering every single fantasy football related comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another video. With that out of the way, let's hop right into the first game of Week 6 of the 2022 NFL season. Starting it off, we got David versus Goliath. We got the Chicago Bears versus the Commanders. Both these teams are pretty bad, not gonna lie. It was a pretty bad game to watch up until the last 5 or so minutes. And in the last 5 minutes, it was actually a fantastic game. We did learn a couple lessons from this. First and foremost, Brian Robinson is the lead back in this offense without question, having 17 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. Whereas Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic combined for 7 carries, and it's only Brian Robinson's second game back. I think Brian Robinson is an absolutely fantastic addition if he is somehow on your waiver wire, and if not, you could still maybe trade low on him if you have some managers that may be unaware of his potential. And then from the Bears side, we still see that Monty is the guy, getting 15 carries to Khalil Herbert's 7. Khalil Herbert, again, looking way more efficient with his work, as Khalil Herbert always does. But they love giving it to David Montgomery, so I would say stick with David Montgomery as long as you can. Other than that, there wasn't really anything too eventful in this game. The tight ends didn't really play well. No wide receiver outside of Dante Pettis did anything special. Dante Pettis putting up 16 fantasy points. Other than that, nobody had over 11. And Carson Wentz had his usual stinkfest. Pretty simple game. Let's move on to our second game, and that is the 49ers versus the Falcons. And this game was wild, especially with Jeff Wilson Jr. fumbling on one of his first drives, and the Falcons ended up returning it for a touchdown. This was pretty crazy to see. 49ers getting blown out by the Falcons. But there was a couple of takeaways from this game. One, Brandon Aiyuk still is very, very talented. Well, yes, he might not get this work every single game because of Debo, because of Kittle. We still saw the talent. He looked really, really good. And then we also see the split between Caleb Huntley and Tyler Algier yet again, with Caleb Huntley getting 16 carries and Tyler Algier getting 15. So, this was the best possible game script you could see for these two guys. And even then, they weren't productive, with Caleb Huntley leading the pack with 5.9 fantasy points. So I don't think Tyler Algier or Caleb Huntley are really worth all that much at this point. Anything you could get, I would pretty much sell them for. Especially when you have Damian Williams coming back. Cordarrelle Patterson should be back at least at some point in this season. He does have a knee injury, and he was placed on IR, but we'll see. Other than that, that was pretty much the main takeaways from this game. Let's move on to our next set of games. Starting with the Patriots versus the Browns. And the Patriots' defense is absolutely ridiculous. We see them holding the Browns to 15 points, and well, yes, Jacoby Brissett is the Browns quarterback. Nick Chubb having 7 fantasy points, 12 carries, 56 yards. He was still somewhat efficient. And Kareem Hunt only getting 4 carries for 12 yards. This is not the Browns offense we know. This is the first time the Browns have had under 150 rushing yards in a game, and they had under 100, so it was pretty embarrassing for the Browns. Jacoby Brissett did not look all that good at 21 of 45, as we expect from Jacoby Brissett. And their leading receiver was Amari Cooper with 4 total receptions on 12 targets, which is promising, but 4 total receptions. And then on the Patriots side, we see that Rhamondre Stevenson, if he is getting the full workload, which he will be with Damian Harris out, we're not sure how long he's going to be out for. He could be coming back this week. He was questionable going into the week with a hamstring injury. But if Rhamondre Stevenson is to get the workload, we're going to see a beastly performance from him. Same thing with Damian Harris. If either of these two guys miss time, the other one is going to ball out. But I would say my main takeaway from this is the Patriots defense being absolutely ridiculous. I think they are one of those few special type of defenses, dare I say it, in fantasy that you could start in more weeks than you otherwise would. And Zappe actually looks like, again, a decent NFL quarterback. I'm not saying he's anything special, but 38 points? That's not bad for a quarterback in his 3rd ever NFL start. But moving on, we got the Jets versus the Green Bay Packers. And my first takeaway from this game is that the Jets might actually, dare I say it, be legit. They've won 3 road games in a row, which just seems absolutely impossible to me, considering the opponents they played. Beating Pittsburgh, Miami, and Green Bay all on the road, back to back to back. That's something I don't think anyone expected the Jets to do, and I'm very happy for them because the Jets have been bad for a long time. And we see Breece Hall look like an absolute monster, get 20 carries, 116 yards, and a touchdown. He's looking like those stud rookie running backs in years past, the Saquon Barkleys, the Todd Gurleys, all those people who balled out very early on into their career. Christian McCaffrey comes to mind as well. And we saw it in his physical profile. He's a very, very talented running back. And now we see him succeeding and taking the full reins of the offense over Michael Carter. On the Packers side, we see a split backfield here. 10 carries for A.J. Dillon, 9 for Aaron Jones. Again, a very painful situation. I do not like either of these running backs at this point. We do see Allen Lazard and Romeo Doubs both getting 9 targets, which is promising for the future. But anyways, let's move on to the Jaguars versus the Colts. So I don't think anyone would have guessed that this was the highest scoring game of the week, but that's what it ended up being. Matt Ryan threw the ball 58 times, and Trevor Lawrence only threw the ball 22, but still it's 80 combined passes. Matt Ryan had 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. He looked like a baller. And one of the rare times Matt Ryan looks like a baller. Usually he hasn't looked that good. Maybe it just he needed some time to click in this offense, but now he finally gets the job done here. Beats a team by scoring more than 20 points. So because Matt Ryan had so many fantasy points, so many yards, we see Michael Pittman ball out, we see Paris Campbell ball out, we see Alec Pierce have a good day in his first NFL touchdown. Even Deion Jackson had the game of his life, putting up 23 fantasy points. I actually played against him this week. Was very painful. But on the other side, we see the Jaguars having Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence looks really, really good out there. ETN and James Robinson are splitting carries yet again, which is painful for ETN owners and for James Robinson owners. But I would personally recommend staying away from both. If I were to own one, I'd probably rather own ETN, just because he will be taking over the job over the coming weeks, but James Robinson will certainly be a factor no matter what, and so I wouldn't really want any of these guys. But anyways, let's move on to the next game. We got the Vikings and the Dolphins. This game we see that Teddy Bridgewater, although he is a backup quarterback, he is much, much, much better than Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson is so bad. I sat Waddle this week in my main league. I mean, I had Marquise Brown and Gabe Davis, so I ended up starting them over Waddle, because I was so scared of Thompson, and then Thompson gets injured. They put back in Teddy Bridgewater, and of course, Tyreek Hill has 177 yards. Jaylen Waddle 129 yards. Neither of them have a touchdown, but they do have fantastic fantasy performances. And I am so excited for Tua Tagovailoa to come back because, frankly, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle will be top 10 fantasy performers yet again with Tua back. Then on the Vikings side, we see Dalvin Cook score pretty much all of his fantasy points on one run. He had a 12-point run, and he finished with 15 total fantasy points, so pretty interesting on the Dalvin Cook side. We also see Justin Jefferson, of course, play well. This is probably a below-average game for him in fantasy, and he still had 107 yards and 6 receptions. But they found a way to win. Vikings are 5-1, which is really interesting. I do really like the Vikings. But the only other takeaway I have is that Raheem Mostert is definitely the lead back in this offense, getting 14 carries for 49 yards. Yes, the fantasy stat line doesn't show that he's going to be great, but Chase Evans getting 2 carries and Alec Ingold getting 1 carry, it proves Raheem Mostert is this guy. I think he's absolutely phenomenal value because, well, yes, you're not going to have those boom, crazy weeks. Raheem Mostert's still a fine running back, and volume is what matters at the running back position in fantasy football. Let's move on to the last game, the Cincinnati Bengals versus the New Orleans Saints. So my main takeaway from the Bengals side is that the Jamarr Chase game was inevitable. We see him get 2 touchdowns. We see him have 28 fantasy points. Fantasy managers were definitely waiting for this, and now they are probably pretty happy. 132 yards, took a crazy 52-yard pass to the house that most other wide receivers would not have been able to take back. But just because Jamar Chase is so talented, he did. Joe Burrow having 32 fantasy points, you're definitely happy about that. And you see Joe Mixon actually not that heavily utilized because of the game script, but he still did get 5 targets. He had 8 carries, and he finished with 15 fantasy points, which is fine. On the Saints side, pretty much all of their wide receivers were out, so it's really hard to tell or gain any real insight into what they're doing with their wide receivers. But Tre'Quan Smith caught a touchdown, I guess. And Rashid Shaheed, a guy who was elevated from the practice squad 2 days ago, ended up running a crazy touchdown to the house. I watched it live, and I was actually blown away with how quick this guy was. It was really, really cool to watch. I hope he does earn more time. This would be a very, very, very deep sleeper here, considering he only had 13% of snaps in this game. But I think his touchdown run was absolutely incredible, so they might work him in just a tiny bit more. And then we see the Taysom Hill experiment, people running out, spending 40% of their fab. Not exactly working, putting up 4.5 fantasy points, 2 completions and 39 rushing yards. Nothing crazy. But anyways, guys, that is it for part 1 of the Week 6 recaps. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys did, leave a like. Again, go down to the comments. I'm answering every single fantasy football related comment. So trade, starts, this, anything. I would love to help you guys out. And subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you do not miss another video. But with that, as always, guys, have a good day. a good night, and a good life.